God has a good and beautiful purpose for human sexuality. Even when it doesn't feel that way, it's true. It was created with intention, with meaning, revealing something about God and about us. And as we learn to trust Him with our sexuality, it draws us closer to Jesus. This is the Christ Centered Sexuality Podcast. We're glad you're here.
All right. Well, welcome back, friends. We are so glad to have you. We are today going to be talking about what do we mean by God's design and is it actually good? And today I'm excited. I think we're going to go a little bit deeper into some of the things that we have been talking about with the why and God's heart and His vision for sexuality. And SJ has a lot of biblical knowledge, and she's studied a lot about these things. And so she's going to dive into some of the theology around a little bit of these things. And I think it's going to be really good. So, SJ.
Yes.
We want to unpack what we've talked about being God's design and His theology around sex and our sexuality being a signpost that draws us to deeper relationship with the Lord.
Yep.
So when we say that and we are thinking through what God's design is, where do we start? Where do we find these things?
That's a really good question.
Can you kind of lead us into that a little bit?
Absolutely, I will. No, I think one thing I will say is that where a lot of people start, and I would caution them, you want to go there eventually, but you don't want to start there. And I think we've had this conversation, but it's a lot of times we'll start with the no, and we'll kind of develop this theology of no regarding sex. And we go to scriptures like Leviticus, and we go to scriptures like sex is between, meant for marriage. And that's fine, that the no plays a role. And those prohibitions and those guidelines and those rules come into play. But when we think of those rules, I had a really good conversation with her name, she's Christine Palmer. She's a brilliant professor and at Gordon Conwell, and we were having this conversation on Leviticus, and we were talking about all of these no's. And she said something that has stuck with me, whereas she's like, if you are obedient to every single one of the no's that's listed in Genesis 18 and 20, which are all the sexual prohibition passages, she's like, if you are obedient to every single one of those no's, which means you submit to Him, it will lead you to one very good yes, which I thought was a really profound way to say it. And so today that we're talking about that, and that one profound yes is actually found in Genesis 1 and 2.
Wow.
And that's something that even I've learned, because when I was studying Leviticus, I got really frustrated with the Lord, because I'm like, okay, we got there's a lot of what not to do, right? And I think as a human being, maybe I was just getting mad because there were so many no's, and it was rubbing against my human nature. It was rubbing against my human nature. But I'm like, man, Lord, okay, we get the no, all right, enough no. Where did you tell them yes? And he actually, it was the Lord was like, well, I said yes back in Genesis 1 and 2. And everything in Scripture, and even in my research, upholds Genesis 1 and 2. Leviticus upholds Genesis 1 and 2. Yeah. Jesus upholds Genesis 1 and 2. Paul upholds Genesis 1 and 2. So when we talk about design and what is God's design and what does He want the sexual relationship to look like? Where's the sexual relationship meant to take place? All of that has to be anchored in Genesis 1 and 2. Yeah. And I think what makes it also really special too is that it's also pre-fall. The sexual relationship and our sexual behavior and human sexuality has been impacted by the fall, but God actually created it pre-fall, and it was a good thing. So I think that's kind of where we have to start.
That's great.
So was that your question?
Yeah.
And then Yeah. So as far as other things, and for me, and I used to have like, I think, an oversimplified version, because I think we want to understand as Christians, hopefully, like, okay, what is God's heart for sexual wholeness then?
Yeah.
What is God's heart for being a single person with a sex drive? Like, how do I pursue sexual wholeness? How does a married couple pursue sexual wholeness? And so my definition of sexual wholeness has evolved over the last few years, and I think I started out with an oversimplified version of it. And as I've dug into this, I'm like, I've discovered that there's so much it's too simple. The sexual union, our human sexuality, is something that's one of the deepest, most profound things about the human experience, and one of the most profound things that I think God has designed.
Yeah.
And so for me, then that simple definition has actually more, and you've heard me teach on this a few different times, and it has actually morphed into I understand sexual wholeness, or how I try to grow in it, is by understanding 4 different theologies. There's 4 theological frameworks I use to understand what God's heart is for our sexual wholeness as human beings. The first one is theology of the body. Second one is theology of marriage. Third is theology of sex. And the fourth is theology of singleness. And so all of those 4 theological frameworks that help me understand what God has for human sexuality.
That's good.
So that's kind of like a big picture starting point.
No, I think
of
that's really
of
good.
where, and it all is rooted and anchored in the Genesis 1 and 2 design.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Which is what?
Great question. I would love to tell you. So so Genesis 1 and 2, that design. So we know that God. I always start with this. God is introduced to us as creator, which is one of my favorite. I mean, him being creator, there's so many things I love about God, but him being creator, I think, is one of the most beautiful things, because if you look around, if you love nature, if you love, like, God created all of it. And so we have a source for that. Mark and Nathan, our friends, who are on the podcast later, they have a podcast, the You Are Here podcast, and they talk about like this clash between like faith and science, and so I think a lot of people today would say, well, prove that God is the creator. Well, I don't have to.
Yeah. My
My faith, like I'm at peace in my faith and my relationship with the Lord, that I believe he is the creator, and life comes from life. And so that's where I always start, is like, God is creator. And the reason why I always want to start at God as creator is because then that means God gets to dictate the terms of how his creation functions.
Yeah, that's good.
And so with human sexuality, there's also lordship implications here. That means that there is an order to which God created, and me as a created being is meant to submit to that order and that function. And I think another part of creation is that every single time God created something, he called it good. And I think a part of why it was good is because it was functioning as it was meant to.
Yeah.
Which I think is just beautiful. So he calls things good. Human beings are actually the only thing in the creation narrative that he calls very good, which I think is special.
Yeah.
But I can't talk about the Genesis design or God's design on human sexuality without first starting there. Because it's a lordship question.
Yeah.
But then you go into Genesis 1, 26 and 27. Well, before there, I'll start. Genesis chapter 1, 26 and 27 is the first mention where we have God mentioning and creating Adam and Eve. He creates them in the image of God. Let us make man in our image, in our likeness. And so that means something. And he creates them male and female. They have male and female bodies. And these male and female bodies work together. We'll see them work together to create life and sustain life later on. And they're two very different things. In a sense, like you could use them as a contrast, like male and female to a degree. And when you talk about the Hebrew, there is a contrast feature of the male and female body. and that working together creates life, which is a really beautiful thing. But before we get there, creation is like a set of, there's like man and woman, Adam and Eve are the last set of contrasts that leads to life in a series of contrasts that actually sustain and make the universe. So it's night and day, sun and moon, land and sea. So we actually see this profound creation of contrasts that work together to sustain what we know as the world and nature today, which I think is significant. They complement one another, yet are different, and that's throughout the whole creation narrative. And so the peak of that is male and female, who are this beautiful contrast, yet similar, that work together to create and sustain life in beautiful ways. And so this image of God is a core Christian doctrine, that every human being is in the image of God. And so this is where I would say, like, the theology of the body stuff kind of has its roots and its anchors. Like, okay, like, this is, if we are created in God's image, then what does that mean for my physical body? What does that mean for me imaging God? What does it mean that does it just mean that, it brings a lot of meaning to the body, in my opinion. Yeah. We are not just solely spiritual beings. We are not just solely emotional beings. We have a physical body that was breathed into by the Lord, and he created us. And so we're in his image. This is a big reason why I think God is so adamant on not creating other images in the Old Testament, because the word here in the image, that is the Hebrew term for image in Genesis 1:26 and 27, that word that we translate to image in this passage can be translated as idol in other passages of the Old Testament. It's the same Hebrew word, and so here it's image, other places it's idol. But basically, what is an idol? It's a representation of a god. And so what that means, and implicationally, is that we in our bodies are living, physical, breathing representations of God. And this one has a lot of implications, because that means every human being that we see is a visible representation of God, whether they know him or not. Right. And that gets into the tension of living on this earth. For me, a way that I get really challenged in this is I always think of someone I don't like, a human being I don't like, or don't get along with, or that's frustrating me. Yeah. And I remember that they too are in the image of God. And just being, I carry the conviction and opinion that a human being, because they're in the image of God, then that means that they inherently require to be treated with dignity and honor. Yeah. Controversial, especially when you're getting with people you don't like, people that have committed massive atrocities to fellow human beings. Like, that's really difficult, and it's a tension that I hold. But if they're a human being, they're in the image of God, and I have to hold that conviction.
Which doesn't mean that everything that they've done, obviously,
exactly
is.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Yeah. Like image, how we reflect God. We're not always. We also have a sin nature too. So yeah. So some implications then I see with this being in the image of God and having a body are my body matters. That's a big thing. Like, and so if my body matters, then that means my femaleness matters, because God created me as a female. If you're a male, your maleness matters. Controversial statement these days, I know, but it's that's the convictions that I hold to. What I do with my body matters. Like, what I use it for, I can use it for good or for evil. I can be careless with my body, and careless has I could be careless sexually with it. I could be careless with danger. Someone that comes to mind with that is like Travis Pastrana. Like, this guy was just like, and it doesn't mean that like him being an adrenaline junkie is evil, but it's just like, okay, like, how to like jumping out of a plane without a parachute not my MO. You might do it, but
Yeah.
but it matters. You
Yeah.
know, what you do with your
Yeah.
body matters. So, and other parts of my embodied experience matter. So like I'm emotional. I'm an emotional being. I have free will. I'm a brain that I can use. And so all of these holistically like matter, and how I cultivate them and use them and steward them, all matter. And one thing that's super important with the theology of the body conversation is that the body matters so much so that if the body doesn't exist, the person doesn't exist. So I get to experience you, Katie, because you have a body, that your body animates your personality. It's the vessel in which your soul, your personality is expressed in. Yeah. And I think for me, this concept has become more profound in the last 3 years because my mom died, 3 years ago now. She lost her battle to cancer. And so I have memories of experiencing love from my mom. I have memories of experiencing her personality, and her orderliness, that wanting to, like I have all those memories, but I no longer get to experience that in the day to day. And so the theology of the body, so a body matters. And so when our bodies die, we no longer get to experience the person. A body personifies and makes it so that we can experience and know a person. You can't know a person if they don't have a body.
That's true. Yeah. Really
The theology, so this could go into incarnation. Like this goes into like, why did Jesus then have to come in a physical body? So this leads into the theology of the body stuff. It goes deep, right? So we don't have time for an incarnation, conversation, but man, it goes deep. So like to really know a person, you get to know them in their body. Yeah. If a person doesn't have a body, they don't exist. Yeah. So that's just a very interesting thing with the theology of the body.
That's so good.
I think some other pieces with theology of the body kind of goes into like everything that it makes us relational. Like how I connect with you and treat you and my other friends and all that kind of stuff. That all matters because you're in the image of God. I'm in the image of God. So how I steward our relationship matters, and how we treat other people, because every human being is in the image of God.
Well, and I think that kind of goes back to what you were saying, even with people that, make horrible choices and hurt other people. It's like we have the ability to actually image God well and according to his true character, or not, and so it's like the image of God is either realized through us or not, and it all has to do with how we are portraying ourselves in our bodies and how we, love and care for the people around us.
Yeah. So there's a lot of, we'll probably have more conversations on the theology of the body and practically and how that, but it's important. Our bodies are so important. And God chose to create us in his likeness too. And that's another thing. And, we should have Mark on, cause Mark has, we do, but Mark has I think he's got like, he has like 11 or 12 thing. He's like the 12 C's of how humanity images and each thing is like communication. That's the only one, but the communication, we are capable. Like there's just, and he has a C word for each way that we image God. And so it's actually, and I told him, I go, you need to write a book on that. So hopefully he listens to me and then credits me.
That's Mark Masucci.
Yeah, Mark Masucci. He'll be on the podcast in a later episode. All things theology, we're probably going to have Mark on, right? So but yeah, so that's that image of God. That for me is kind of where this theology of the body gets anchored in. Another, like I used, Christopher West has a lot of, and Pope John Paul II have written brilliant stuff on so it's all, go read there for further learning, dive into that.
Okay. So you're talking about 4 main theologies. We've talked about the theology of the body, which was the first one that you mentioned.
Yep.
That was the first one, or
that was the first one.
Okay, so now there's 3 more.
So now there's 3 more. So theology of marriage, So that has its roots in Genesis 2:18 and 20.
Okay.
Well, generally, I guess overall, it's Adam and Eve.
Mhm.
That's where
Yeah.
the roots and the anchor of theology of marriage and theology of sex are for me. And they kind of go, for me, theology of marriage, they all overlap. All of these four theologies create a framework to which we understand sexual wholeness and God's heart for our sexual lives. But they also have overlap too. So it's like, if you want to understand theology of sex, you have to understand theology of the body. If you understand and theology of marriage and theology of singleness.
Yeah.
So it's all that's
so
all
they're not necessarily four separate theologies.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of a framework of God's design.
Mm-hmm. It's
and
how I've
we
been
understand all of these different aspects. I think that maybe as a culture, we're probably even wrestling through like, okay, what is God's design about our bodies?
Yeah.
You know, for our bodies, for our sexual being, for our marriages, for our singleness.
Yeah.
Those are kind of like the major questions that I think even in our culture we're asking and trying to define. So
No, and and even with the theology of the body. So theology of the body, our bodies are not just like, and I think this is Christopher West who says this, he says that our bodies are not just biological or theological. As I've studied this, like there is not one thing, in my opinion, as I'm growing in it, there is not one thing God has created that does not communicate something about who he is. And that is, the more you keep going down that road, the more you're like, oh my gosh, everything God has created has massive intention and purpose behind it. And all of it is to reveal himself to us.
Yeah.
So, and it's the same for these four theologies, I would say. But so for theology of marriage and theology of sex, I'm in the Adam and Eve story. Specifically, I'm in Genesis 2:18 and 2:20. And this is where the phrase the Genesis author uses, a helper fit for him. And so a lot of us probably understand, and I don't have my master's in Hebrew, so I don't pronounce the words all correctly, so forgive me, but we've all probably had like a lecture on helper, which is the Hebrew word Yezar, or I think it's something in that ballpark. But there's so many, church sermons on the term helper.
Yeah.
What does it mean that Eve was a helper? What is it? Anyway, side note: helper is a word that God uses to describe himself. And later, but it's totally different. So the first word that he uses to describe Eve is the same word that he uses to describe himself.
Wow.
Women are awesome. So we're not just little helpers, right? But the word I kind of go in here is the word that qualifies helper in English. It's the word fit. So, and there's several English translations that they're all different because they're all trying to translate the Hebrew word that is translated as fit. And so like, I think it's ESV is a helper fit for him. NIV is a suitable helper. So what makes Eve, there was no, like, Adam is naming all the animals and there's no suitable helper for him.
Right.
Adam is naming all the animals and there's no helper fit for him.
Right.
New Living Translation says a helper just right for him. I think other translations say a helper corresponding to him. So there's all these different, we're all set on helper.
Yeah.
That's a common whatever, but all these translators are like, we don't know what is it, fit helper, corresponding helper, just right helper, suitable helper. Like it's all these qualifiers of helper that these translators are trying to figure out. And the Hebrew word is kenegdo. And so basically Adam he was first created. He names all the animals, and and Tyler Staton from Bridgetown Church says it this way. They did it. He's like, God was kind of helping Adam feel the need that he didn't have. Like all these animals had corresponding parts. They had, Adam didn't have his. And so God kind of let him feel his need for a corresponding helper, like someone that would be fit for him, which I think is a very interesting thing. And this is all pre-fall. So Adam, like God is actually bringing Adam through a process pre-fall, like, and maybe it's suffering, maybe it's a form of suffering, perseverance. And then Eve comes on the scene, and we have to ask the question, okay, because she's described in this way, she was a suitable helper. Well, what makes her a suitable helper for Adam? And we have to go to the Hebrew for this, and the Hebrew word that we translate fit is kenegdo. And kenegdo is a compound word, and in Hebrew, ke means as or like. So Eve was like Adam. Negedo means different or opposite. So in one word in Hebrew that we don't have in English, unfortunately, in one word, Eve is described as like but different, or like but opposite.
Or
like
if they
or
were in Asia, it would be same but different.
Same. Yeah, exactly. So against, and another word is against, like but against. So there's just this, and this kenegdo captures this difference that Eve had, and it's this like but against difference that makes her this suitable, fit, corresponding helper to Adam. And I think that this is something that's super important when it comes to answering the question, what is God's design? A big question we get is, why male and female? Or is it male and can two people of the same sex get married? And for me, it's a no, because of this Hebrew term kenegdo.
Yeah.
And so that's my conclusions. That's where my convictions land. I'm sure you're similar. But like from a non-affirming perspective, this is where we get the male and female in marriage. It's the two different bodies. And then you get, again, we're going to go back into the theology of the body, two different bodies. And I think Lori Krieg captures this concept really, really well when she says, how different is God from us? We image him. So there is some likeness there for sure.
Right.
But he is so different than us.
Different.
Like and so Lori Krieg just unpacks this really well. She's like, God is so vastly different from us, but he still wants to be one with us.
Right.
And so when a very different male and a very different female that is expressed in their body come together, it gives us a picture of the gospel, this gospel picture of God wanting to be one with us. And so that gets into the theology of the marriage. So God didn't create anything without purpose or meaning or value. And it's all meant to communicate something.
That's amazing.
And so that goes into, I think, our last episode where we talked about the vision.
Yeah.
Like the marriage union is actually a gospel picture of God reuniting with his church. Right?
That's so cool.
So,
and I think it's so powerful too when you think about what's produced then through that marriage union. I mean, creation is produced through that. You know, life is produced through that. And I mean, that's incredibly significant on so many levels then. With that we get to participate in something so powerful. Yeah.
No, I think I don't know, the more I study this stuff, the deeper it goes for me, the more impactful it is. And the more, I think, as a single person, the more I want to honor it and uphold it in my, like, abstaining from it. Because, like, for me, it's just like, okay, if the body matters, marriage matters. Now we'll talk about the theology of sex. If it's all meant to tell a story, and that story is the gospel, then I want to make sure I'm dignifying that act in such a way that it keeps it in an honorable place. You know, and like as a single person, that's kind of how perspective I have on one of the reasons why I choose celibacy as a single person.
And I think honestly, like, that combats so much of what our culture, at least in the West, I think portrays and is conditioning us to feel all the time that that we are the most important, you know, and what you're highlighting in some of this is just the reality that actually this world and everything in it belongs to God. We are his creation, and we are put here for a purpose to image him. It's actually not about us. And we get that confused so often. I think it's so hard for us to remember that sometimes, even as a believer, to always remember that actually this whole thing is about God. And when we remember that, it's easy to see how that order that he's put in place is actually, okay, this is not actually about me. This is about worshiping the Lord and bearing his image to the world so that the world can actually know him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. No. And I'm in total agreement. I mean, now I'm teaching in DTSs and we'll get into the theology, but like, because I'm seeing just so much so about how our bodies, marriage, sex, and singleness, what like they communicate the gospel in such profound ways. Like now I've gotten, it's not for the sake of saying no and having a theology of no, but it's understanding the vision and purpose for this stuff that that my value for the prohibition of no sex before marriage has gotten stronger, right? And so it's like when if I get asked like, hey, what are some, physical boundaries in dating? And I'm probably not the right person to ask if you don't want, because you need to care very deeply about that, because sex is so important for the message that God is trying to use. And if you get physical with someone that God is not calling you into marriage to, then that is really problematic for me. It doesn't mean that it's outside the bounds of redemption and grace and all those things. But it's like, I want to help people catch a vision for marriage, for the body, for sex, for each other, that you're willing to abstain from something that is so powerful for the right reasons, because you understand that, like, okay, the sexual union is actually communicating the gospel, which is a very interesting concept. Like, it's so deep. It's sex, but it's more than just sex. It's created. It has a massive purpose and intention behind it that I think we have not. I don't think we've done a great job in the church communicating. We've done a great job communicating the no, but the vision and these kind of theological frameworks, I think we can do better at communicating.
Yeah.
So,
which is why we're here trying to do it.
That's why we're here trying to do it.
Yeah. No, that's so good. Yeah.
So with that, so when you being in Genesis 2:18 and 2:20, then Adam and Eve, suitable helper. But then the minute Adam finds a suitable helper, they move into Genesis 2:24, which is the two become one and hold fast to one another, and they become one flesh. Like therefore is Adam will leave his mother and father and hold fast to Eve, and the two become one flesh. So the hold fast. So the two key terms then in Genesis 2:24 are hold fast, and then one flesh. So hold fast. That's where we get the covenant language from. Like hold fast for a Hebrew mind would be like stick to, adhere to, like think super glue. Like this is
forsaking all others. Like it's like I'm clinging to this person for it's covenantal implications. So God is like, okay, like marriage is, that's how I always say marriage is a covenant, and marriage is lifelong. Yeah. It is something that it's a binding thing. So Adam held fast. He entered into a binding contract for the rest of his life to Eve. And so that's where we get the covenant language from, is that term hold fast. Well, then the other term there is one flesh. And so the term one flesh, there's two different perspectives that I like to highlight for this one. There's the Hebrew perspective, and then there's the Greek perspective. The reason why I highlight both is because the original language that Genesis was written in is Hebrew. Okay. But then it was also about 200 years before Christ, Hebrew was translated into Greek. And so there's a Greek worldview that has this, and that is important to understand. But so this term one flesh for the Hebrew mind, for the Hebrew reader, when they're like, oh, Adam and Eve became one flesh, they actually, for them, they would say, oh, they just became one family. They just created a brand new family in the sexual union. And that's even if children are a part of it or not. Like whether children are procreated or not. Yeah. When the sexual relationship happens, that couple now becomes a family. And that was the Hebrew mind. For the Greek mind, this term one flesh is like
the couple actually becomes two separate things become one thing. Like they literally become one entity or one substance, which is interesting. And so I think holding the two together is really helpful for helping us understand, oh, this is like one flesh is like, and the way a person becomes one flesh with another person is the sexual act. That is how they become one family. That is how they become one entity. And we know that because of how Paul talks about it in 1 Corinthians, like when he's confronting the Corinthians about going around sleeping with prostitutes. It's like, you're becoming one flesh with these prostitutes. How can you become one flesh with many? And he's kind of calling them, be like, this is something serious that you need to take. Like this is a family creating event. When you have sex with someone, it's family creating, whether children happen or not. And so it's like, do you want to be family with this person? You know, like, so it's like we just, it's so casual now. We don't think in
and
these
family
terms.
had some pretty big implications at that point too, like what the responsibilities were when someone was family and how to care for them. And so there was some real strong implications of what that actually meant. It was not a casual thing. Like now that person is your responsibility.
No, there was a lot of like the ancient way of life and how they viewed family was wildly significant and important. And I think we've lost that today. We've lost it because we've so casualized the sexual union. We've casualized sex. We've used it for marketing. We've used it to sell things. We've said it's a self-serving. Sex is only for pleasure. You must gratify all desire. Like it's just our narrative.
Or that it's a basic need.
Yeah, it's a basic need, like water or food, which I disagree with. Like,
well, I think it puts us on the same level as animals in some ways, and that's actually what the beginning of Scripture distinguishes us from. It's like we actually are different. So this isn't necessarily the same kind of need, you know, that animals have, and you know, to procreate. It's like this is something so much deeper.
Totally agree. And so with this theology of sex and this one flesh union, there's a few things that I always teach with that, because everything, a lot of times we can think of like, oh, sex is just physical. Like we're no different than animals. We need sex. We're entitled to it. But for the human being, that's actually not true. And if you do research on like what is happening during research in the sense of like what is happening on a biological, hormonal like level, chemical level during the act of sex, is that there are hormones being released during this time, during the sexual union, that are actually bonding hormones for both male and female. One of the hormones is oxytocin, which is a bonding hormone. So it's like literally what's coursing through your veins when you're engaging in sexual behavior is a bonding agent that is trying to bond you to the person that you're engaging in sexual behavior with. And so I think that that's something that we need to steward. Like, it's just like, this is not meant for everyone. And I actually read an article. I can't remember. I'll put it in the description, but I can't remember the chick that wrote it. But she actually described as the sex hormones as human emotional superglue. And so it's like whenever you engage in the sexual union, you are like emotionally supergluing yourself to that person. And that has a lot of implications and a lot of different things that we don't have time to go into. If we can talk about those implications probably in another episode, but it's like, okay, if you engage in premarital sexual behavior with someone that God is not calling you into marriage to, there's pretty hard ramifications and consequences for that, you know, that are painful. And so we have to just consider this. So like everything, how God designed our bodies in the sexual behavior was designed it to uphold that hold fast mandate. He has that covenantal mandate. It's meant to bond you. And so one of the most annoying questions I hate is how far is too far, you know, because it's seeing how close we can get to that sin line or that sexual immorality line. And I'm just not a fan of that question anymore at all. Like it's a question I asked myself growing up, you know, like how far is too far before it's actually sin. And I wish that people would change that, like change their question from how far is too far, like meaning how close to sin can I get before it's sin, to how do I honor my body? How do I honor other people with the behavior? And how do I just steward my body well? And because after reading all this stuff, for me, as I studied the theology of sex, I can't help but understand sexual behavior as marriage behavior. Like that is, those two are so intertwined for me. Like, so if it's sexual behavior and I've used that term, like, rather than just like the act of sex, because to me, sexual behavior, like that's more of an umbrella statement, you know? But I think sexual behavior is marriage behavior, and therefore sexual behavior belongs in a marriage covenant.
So then with that, I wonder too, though, if I think maybe there's two things that sometimes people are asking when they're asking how far is too far. I think for sure one of them is how close can I get to it without really sinning. I just want to kind of touch it a little bit, you know, that's bad terminology. So sorry.
All right. We're leaving that in. We're not editing that out, by the way. That's stayed in.
We'll just leave that there.
Sorry, YouTube.
But I also think that I wonder when you're talking about sexual behavior and what is marriage behavior, I wonder if maybe there's also a question of at what point then is it marriage behavior? Where is
the line?
Because
it's like
over
because
from
I think
like being not marriage behavior to all of a sudden being marriage behavior.
Do you want me to answer that?
I would love for you to answer.
So my opinion, and I would actually love to hear your opinion. My opinion on this is it's when arousal happens.
Okay.
Because biologically, and maybe even before then, like you want to think, because if you're at this point of arousal, your body's engaged because it was designed to go somewhere with arousal.
Yeah.
And so that makes stewarding our sexual behavior and our relationships, our dating relationships, our engaged relationships, it makes stewarding those so much more difficult but at arousal, those sex hormones, those that are bonding you to that person are starting to engage at that point. And so that's kind of, so that would be my initial response to that question of like, okay, if there is a line, like do you, and that requires like self-awareness, self-control, what is getting me to those points, and having just a realistic conversation with yourself of like, okay, this is kind of a point where I'm at that I don't want to cross that anymore. I don't know, but for me, that's kind of where I've started to talk about like, okay, what are the boundaries, and when do we know we're moving too far down this path?
No, I think that's good. I think arousal can happen without another person. You know,
agreed.
present. So I think in some ways, are you saying that arousal becomes the warning sign?
Yeah, I'd say. I mean, if you're thinking of a car dashboard, like when like you've got to pay attention to like what like there's gonna be things that are normal, and that just being a human, you know, like and not be like stuff happens, and we have to talk about that. I think we have to have honesty. We have to have good friends in our life that we can be vulnerable with those things, you know, and because it's like, what are we doing with those points of arousal? But I think it's just like, okay, like we want to envision our bodies of like, okay, like a dashboard of a car, like of a car, like it's like, okay, they're normal, and then they're warning. Warning. And then there are things that like, is this the appropriate time for this? Like, what is? I think asking those questions, like why am I experiencing arousal? You know, like what?
And I don't think I would say arousal is not wrong. Arousal is that's a normal bodily function.
Yep.
But I do think, and maybe what you are really trying not to say words.
Just say it.
What you're really hitting on there is the fact that, okay, that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're faced with a choice at that point.
Yep.
Are we going to engage?
Mm-hmm.
Or are we going to say, okay, this is the point where I need to
Mm-hmm.
start thinking about some things,
Mm-hmm.
and I need to not even necessarily like flee and run the other direction, but
Yep.
really start having some honest conversations with
Mm-hmm.
myself about how do I navigate this well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like you said, like it just happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think everybody has gone through like a normal day and nothing sexual is happening,
Yeah.
and then the body engages,
Yeah.
and so you're just that's a normal thing.
Mhm.
It's not, and I think across the board, arousal is something that you want as a human being. It's
Mhm.
meant to teach us something. It's meant to
Yeah.
it's meant to be, and I keep saying this language, it's meant to be stewarded, and because it is, you know. And I think having honest questions and knowing what to do when those
Mhm.
things happen. Do we dwell on it?
Mhm.
Do
And
we,
sometimes it is appropriate to turn the other direction
Yeah.
and
do
walk
we?
away.
Yeah. I think the Bible gives us a bunch of examples of what we can do with it.
Yeah.
Do we flee from it? If we're married, do we do something about it? Like in the right sense? Like
Right.
is what is happening? Am I lusting? Like
Mhm.
is that because we don't want to. Lust is one of the prohibited sexual practices. FYI, like we don't want to become people that our arousal causes us to lust and to stumble and that kind of stuff. And so we just want to. We really, I think when that happens, we have to ask ourselves questions.
Yeah.
And we have to say, why is this happening? Is this like, what do I do with this? What are healthy outlets? What are unhealthy outlets? What are outlets that are going to lead me towards the Lord? What are outlets that are going to lead me towards sin?
Yeah.
And especially if that's like, I mean, I think that's a statement across the board, but if you're engaging in physical behavior with another human being and arousal is happening, is that your spouse? Are you married to that person? If you're not, that's wildly problematic. Again, arousal is normal, and I don't want to shame people, right? But like we have to figure this out.
Well, and there is, I think we can all be honest with ourselves too, that there are things that we can do to control that arousal or to let it go, you know. And sometimes it's like we know when we hit that point what's happening, and if we know that, then we know from there on out that's going to continue to happen if we entertain those things. So God's given us the ability to have self-control. It's one of the fruits of the Holy Spirit. And so we need to honor ourselves and honor the Lord and honor each other.
Yeah, and I can't remember what episode we talked about it on, but again, it goes back to the why does God care about human sexuality? Like what is it there? Why is our desire there? Again, it's all gonna point back to intimacy with the Lord. Like at the end of the day, the same word for sexual intimacy and knowing is knowing, like yada, like intimacy, like it's an intimate experience, and God wants intimacy with us. And so at the end, and he gives the sexual union and marriage that is a signpost, like pointing towards the ultimate union and marriage that we're all moving towards, which is in Revelation 19. So like there's purpose and vision behind it, and again, we have to steward it and honor it well.
I think too, there is a protective measure that comes with a covenant before we enter a sexual relationship with somebody, because of that bonding chemical that happens, and because of what's produced. A family is produced oftentimes through sexual union, and so it's like God's also protecting what's produced through that, in the sense that we actually are required to make some promises and to say, I'm in this for life before I enter into this, because of what that actually does. There's safety in that. When you look at the ways that they were to care for their families and care for children
Yep.
and things like that, the responsibilities that come with what it looks like to have a family, it's protected by that covenant.
Yep.
And when we walk in sexual relationship outside of that covenant, there is no protection.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we forget that too,
Mm-hmm.
that actually the Lord really cares about guarding the special,
Yeah.
powerful
Yep.
things that happen by that covenant promise that we
Agreed.
make to each other.
Agreed. Like the covenant and the promise of faithfulness
Mm-hmm.
protects the level of vulnerability that is
Mhm.
experienced in the sexual union.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if someone is callous towards that because they've been casual with their sexual behavior, I think that you can grow callous and get a
Yeah.
hard heart towards it. But it is I think if we're honest with ourselves, I think we'd at least be honest, be like, hey man, that is a very vulnerable thing that we're doing.
Mhm.
And I want the promise that matches the level of
Yeah.
vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I think it causes pain. It does cause pain. Like sexual behavior when it is not matched by that promise, I think it
Mhm.
does cause more pain.
Mm-hmm.
I think if people were more honest, maybe honest with themselves, they
Yeah.
would admit that.
Yeah.
But it's a hard thing to admit,
Yeah.
and we want to have grace for that. But I
Yeah.
think this is why I love doing what I do, because it's just like, oh man, I'm learning so much. It's just like a part
Mhm.
of this is like, hey, like there is a rich theology
Mhm.
and purpose behind all of this,
Mhm.
that and God's heart for this, and he cares
Mhm.
about this so much. So let's figure out how to honor God with it. Not with like, and that's a thing too, is like, how do we teach this stuff and how do we communicate this stuff without, from a vision of purpose and what God wants for it, but not shame, right? Because I think that purity culture of the 90s, 2000s, I think it's still floating around out there. I think their intention was I think their heart was good. Like I think they had the right intention because they understood that like this is an important thing. Their methods maybe and their pastoral care, like it was more shame dense, and we want to be careful. We don't want to so it's like we want to make sure that we, like, if mistakes have been made, if we have fallen into not stewarding our arousal situations well, or our relationships well, if we have crossed boundaries, like man, there is an abundance of grace and forgiveness for that. But hey, there's also, with that, we have to walk in some conviction, and we have to come to some realization of like, okay, well, I haven't honored God well with my body. I haven't honored this part well. And so how do I do it well? What does self-control look like for me? What does stewarding this part of my life well? What does it look like to love and honor the person I'm dating, you know? And how do you, and I think it's all, and how do we do that without shame-based, you know, all that kind of stuff.
No, that's really good.
And then the last thing or the fourth theology that comes with all of this, it has its roots, yes, because the minute marriage becomes a thing, singleness now becomes a thing. But it doesn't talk about it. Paul actually is it's in the Old Testament. There's lots of single people. Joseph was single. There's a lot of single people in the Old Testament, but Paul, I think, Jesus was single, but as far as like kind of capturing like that, the theology of being this theology of singleness, it really gets its traction with Paul, I think, in 1 Corinthians 7, like we talking about singleness, but it again goes back to the minute marriage is an option, singleness is also an option. And the theology of singleness is also pointing us somewhere, and it's communicating a part of the gospel. The married relationship is a metaphor of the gospel, the Christ and the church here and now, but singleness is the eternal part of that. So it's like when we're all single and married to Christ in heaven, you know. And so single people and the theology of singleness, that really is like married people and single people together, when they function in community together, I think you actually get a more holistic picture of the gospel. Like it's not just married people, but because that's the church here and now, but it's also single people. And I can't remember who used this terminology, but it's like the married couple is a metaphor for Christ and the church, but the single person is like a living prophecy for where the church is
That's
going.
good.
Like, so
Yeah.
I can't remember who
good.
said it. It might have been the Bridgetown Church in their the good news about our bodies. Like they said that bit. So it's like my life is a living prophecy of where all of this is going.
Yeah.
And just the theology of singleness is, so it's all overlapped, and we need both. We need both. Single people and married people both serve a purpose. Both, one is not more spiritual than the other. One does not disqualify someone from things like leadership,
Agreed.
callings, and all that kind of stuff. It's, what are you called to? And be obedient to that calling. Are you called to marriage? Are you called to singleness?
Yeah.
God has a plan for you and a purpose for it. So,
well, and I've often thought when we look at holiness and what it looks like to really walk in lordship, I've looked at your life and people's lives like you who have been called into singleness and celibacy, and I feel like there's something so profound about what you are leading out in the sense of you walk out daily what it looks like for lordship in this area of your life in a way that I think those of us who are even married and have families could really learn from. And I wouldn't be surprised if so many of the people that are in similar situations like you are going to be leading the charge of what that lordship really looks like, for us to see as an example, you know, as believers. And I think it's powerful.
Yeah, I mean, we need all of it. And I think, I can't remember what episode, but it's like your marriage is a part of your sanctification process. I think my singleness is a part of my sanctification process. And I think no matter what we're called to or what our lives look like, we're all being formed into the image of God, and and God is going to call us into seasons of life that just make us more into the image of, he's making us, he's transforming us into the image of Christ. And that is a very beautiful thing.
Agreed.
So,
Yep. Some of us just need other people to bring out our
some of us just need it
unchrist likeness.
You know what? We're all unlike Christ, so it's okay. But
No,
that, I mean, in a nutshell, in under an hour, I think that is the four theologies. And I think I probably could elaborate more on the theology of singleness, but I think that we can probably do a whole episode on singleness, because I think, well, I mean, we can do it on marriage too, but I think, but in a nutshell, I think that's what I would kind of button up the God's design. I don't know if I've missed anything.
Yeah.
But
I think
when I say
so
God's
good.
design, I think this is where I go to automatically and try to unpack, like, hey, like, this is what I mean. This is where we get the importance of the body, male, female. So answer some of the big questions for a Christian worldview.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good. And I think there is a cost that's felt to God's design when we look at sometimes what the world experiences and all of that. It's like, I think what we're up against sometimes is we're waiting for something, you know, that some of us won't get to experience until we get to heaven. And literally all of us, actually, because even within a marriage, you have imperfect people trying to love each other the way that Christ loves the church, but failing. Because we're human and we're all being sanctified. But there's a cost to living out God's design when we look at what we could indulge in the here and now that looks so attractive to us. And honestly feels good to our human nature to experience and all of that. And so, it requires some surrender, and we feel that cost sometimes.
I think it's taking up the cross. It's the carrying of the cross, right? There is the Christian life is, I think there's the hard thing is that there are unfortunately several brands of Christianity nowadays, which is why I'm having Nathan and Mark on the podcast to help us define Christianity, because I think that that's super important for like what and I hold to an orthodox historical traditional Christianity. You do too. And not to speak for you, but I'm assuming right. But I think a brand of Christianity can communicate. Like there's certain brands that would say like, come to Jesus and you're not going to struggle. You're not going to, he's going to like disappear like all of your issues, that kind of stuff. And that's just when I read the New Testament, when First Peter specifically, when it promises suffering and things like this for the Christian, I'm just like, okay, well, what does that look like? You know, and when Jesus says, take up your cross, like that was not an easy, the march of the cross was a painful thing for Jesus. And so what does that look like? It's a beautiful relationship that we have with the Lord. And it's costly, but that it's worth it because it's totally worth it because of but I think that,
but it takes an element of faith to actually even believe that sometimes. And I think honestly, and I think both of us could probably say this, there have been moments where it's like, well, is it really worth it? And how do we know? And those are normal human questions, I think. And so I think that even in this, there's a desire to paint the picture that, yes, it involves some cost. And yes, it requires some faith to believe that what we're headed towards is so much better than anything that the world has to offer us, anything that our human sinful nature desires. And a lot of that does involve trusting Jesus, but there is an aspect of the fact that it really is possible to experience some of that fulfillment here and now.
Agreed.
And when we have that perspective of God's design and what it's intended for and how we can walk out our singleness and how we can walk out our marriages in a way that actually reflect the Lord, we have the capability to bring that picture to earth here and now. Of what that fulfillment actually can look like. And I think that, and I don't know if you have any closing thoughts on this, but I wonder if some of that lordship and us kind of coming back to a place where we are putting God on the throne in these areas of our lives, we're kind of ushering in that fulfilled life, not just for ourselves, but for the world to see that it really is so much better when we walk out his design.
No, and I would agree wholeheartedly with all of that. I think for me, like if there's a closing thought or maybe a to be continued thought with this conversation is what I think a question that I ask is in the same lines of like, okay, is this worth it? Why is this worth it? And for me, it requires faith for sure, but I have a very strong belief and conviction that life with God is the best life anyone could choose. And it is only, and it goes back to, I think I said this in the first episode, but it's like Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. So Jesus offers this path that he describes as narrow. And I think I think this the theology of sex, marriage kind of communicates that, because in Leviticus we have all these no's, right? There's just don't do this, don't do that. And we have one yes, you know, and well, two technically, because I think the single celibate person upholds the yes as well. So I think that's a part of the conversation. But it is by this one yes and upholding that one yes that we find the narrow path into flourishing. I am just this. Maybe this is controversial. It's controversial for sure from a worldly perspective, but I am not lacking anything because I don't have sex
Mm-hmm.
in my life.
Mm.
Like that is like, if that is a lie of our time, is that if you want fulfillment, if you want to feel like you should be having sex, right?
Mm.
And or if you're not having sex, you're missing out on something. I'm not. Like again, I've found the greatest love. I found the path towards flourishing,
Mm.
and it's by upholding all of these theologies and doing my best by His grace to submit to them in how God would ask me to submit to them. And for me, that's singleness and celibacy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so like that's the conviction that I hold, in that it's by this path, it's the narrow way, that I have found a full life. It's not a life void of pain. It's not a life void of suffering or seasons of life that require perseverance. But I have found a full flourishing life because I found Him. I found a relationship with Jesus and the God of the universe, and that is what makes all of this worth it. And the good, the joyous, the hard, the painful, the seasons of loneliness, it's all worth it because it's all going somewhere, and God is cultivating something in me. And there is an end. My suffering this side of heaven has an expiration date. There's going to be a point when my suffering ends. Whether I experience through passing of like death or Jesus comes again, like my suffering will end, and I will find my way into eternity. You know, and that's maybe a dark way to end the body. Like I don't know, but I don't know. Hopefully that captures like my heart of there is a deep theology that surrounds our human sexuality. I scratched the surface with what you can do in an hour. And so we'll probably have more episodes diving in, but it's like, why is it worth it to me? You know, and it's worth it because I found the greatest love. And so I will do what I need to do.
Yeah. Well, and just quick encouragement to anybody who's called into marriage. It doesn't change that we still need to find our first and truest love in the Lord in order to experience that flourishing life. We're not going to find it in another person anyway. And so, I think this is all incredible stuff. I think we could talk about this for so much longer, and we probably will have lots of questions that come up, lots of things that we didn't get into this time, but we're just kind of scratching the surface. We're going to go deeper and deeper into these things. As you have questions, feel free to reach out. We'd love to have more pointed conversations in the directions that you guys want to go. And so we just appreciate you being here. I hope that you're blessed, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for being here. If someone came to mind while you were listening, share this with them. And wherever you are in your journey, keep trusting Jesus. He's leading you somewhere good. We'll see you next time.